Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Uh, just letting people join in. Hey, where are people signing in from? You can use the chat.
Berlin.
Oh yeah, or you can say out loud. Yeah. Um, South Africa, Trevor, and just levels of maybe levels of experience with trying to integrate some of the breathing practices into running, or if you have um, any running experience at all. So obviously we've been talking and sharing about what I'd done. I think it's 3 weeks ago now, actually. Yeah, and would love to love to make sure that we've got time within this to answer any questions of as well as me giving you a bit of an idea of what the purpose was and what were some of the findings, etc. Um, is that okay with people?
Looks like Jacko just got kicked out of the Zoom. I'm sure he'll be back in a minute. I'll just give him a second.
Hello. Right. Terrible. Apologies. Um, my computer just died, which is classic, isn't it? Um, let's let's give you a little bit of an insight into what was the purpose and what was the point of what we were trying to achieve. Um, First of all, I guess the headline thing would be that there's two brain injury charities that I've done some fundraising for before, and that would be the headline slash more like obvious reason why we might be doing something like this. So I had a brain injury that ended my rugby career back in 2013, so somewhat 12 years ago. And there is a link between how breathing affects the respiratory centers, how breathing affects the nervous system. And back then, the advice around breathing, and I wasn't even aware of these charities even at the time. Um, and the advice back then was basically do nothing, and we just hope that you're going to get better from your brain injury one day. So I was a little bit in the dark for a very long time, and so being having got myself back to being able to be physically active, and then running for me was a I actually really didn't like running at all when I was first able to run again. And it took me a year to get to the point where I could actually run without my brain injury symptoms kicking off. But at that point, I hadn't come across breathing and how breathing was going to be an essential role for improving blood flow and oxygen supply to the brain, and breathing being a key role in helping to regulate my nervous system, which had been dysregulated because of the trauma of the brain injury. So those things eventually led me down a path to finding Patrick and the oxygen advantage. And then at that point, that whole thing just opened my eyes up to like, there's something that I can actually do to help me with my brain health, and it was breathing. Um, the trouble I had was I wasn't very good at it, I as in breathing, and also I wasn't able to feel my own breathing, and I found it very difficult to work on my breathing doing static breathing exercises, sat or lying down. So what I ended up falling in love with running was running gave me the chance to feel and experience my breathing in a much more heightened state. But I could run at a pace and move in an intensity that allowed me to start to get better control of my breathing. So for me, running was a way to make myself better at breathing, which I'd identified was something I needed to do to help improve my brain health post my traumatic brain injury and help to um, regulate the nervous system dysregulation. Ironically, even though I hated running, it was this very useful tool. The cyclical nature of running with the cyclical nature of your breathing meant that I started to get better at breathing. And as I got better at breathing, I then actually got better at running. And then guess what? When you're a bit better at running and you're not constantly feeling out of breath because you can't control your breathing, um, it's a much more enjoyable experience. And I think my road into then actually doing some things was I was sat one Christmas, I think maybe 7 years after I've retired. So maybe it was 2020. It was just before COVID, actually. Yeah, the Christmas before COVID. And we were talking about New Year's resolutions. And I was like to one of my friends, I was like, oh, I've always wanted to do a marathon, but I could never do a marathon because when I played rugby, you weren't allowed to, do train for something like that because it wasn't specific to your sport, and you might get injured and it's not going to be helpful for your actual playing career. So you'd have things written into your contract. You weren't allowed to go skiing or do anything fun and all that sort of stuff. So the irony was I was still stuck in that mindset where even though I'd not played rugby for 7 years, I'd been retired. Um, I was still not doing the thing that I wanted to. I'd said I'd always wanted to do. So I just immediately did the easiest thing. The easiest thing about running a marathon is signing up for the marathon. That just takes a few clicks of a button. So I signed up to a marathon and then had to do the hard work of actually then obviously training for it. And after I completed that first marathon in, I think it must have been then 2021. It could have even been 2022. Um, After I finished that first marathon, I was very sore the next day, and it blew my mind that people did more than one marathon a day, like ran ultra marathons, and would do things like day after day after day after day. I was like, how on earth is that even possible? But the way my brain tends to work is like because someone else could do it, I wanted to experience it myself, or like I would, if someone else can do it and multiple hundreds of people, thousands of people can do it, then it's something I can train myself to be able to do. And there was this intrigue with me of like, can I do that? What would it be like to try and experience that? Because I cannot run 1 meter today, like the day after that first marathon. Um, so as things have gone on, my training has then changed and been geared towards that. And I've really enjoyed both the physical as well as the mental, psychological challenge and battle of doing long endurance events. The thing that links those two, the physical and the mental, the physiology and the psychology, being our breathing, and something that has just become more and more apparent to me as I've done more and more events, either long distance, like 100-kilometer type of things, or multiple day events, has been this notion that if I can regulate my nervous system, I change my feedback loop to the brain, which typically when things get very, very hard and you feel like you're getting very stressed physically, mentally, emotionally, and and this can happen in not just a physical endeavor, it could happen in anything, but in these physical endeavors, it's going to happen where you feel like you've reached your limit, and you feel like you haven't got anything else. But when we approach that point with a well regulated nervous system, I've seen for myself that we're far more capable than we allow ourselves to believe or we perceive when we're in a more stressed state. So, yes, Mission Wales was about raising money for two brain injury charities, Headway UK and Head for Change. The challenge itself that I was trying to take on was trying to put this in space again. Like, okay, so if I believe that with a well-regulated nervous system, I can achieve more than I think or we think is physically possible, what might that look like? And something that is difficult is running multiple marathons a day for X number of days. What's really hard is running two marathons a day for multiple days. And um, I then, 3 weeks ago, ran from St David's Head in the south of Wales all the way up the west coast of Wales along the coastal path, covering 288 miles, something like 450 odd or 460 kilometers in 6 days, which was an average of like two marathons a day for those 6 days, or thereabouts. And we had something like 13,000 meters of elevation. Um, it was tough. And not necessarily ironically, the bigger picture, and the truth of the whole thing is that I have a plan and was always planning for something much bigger next year. That is something like 15 times as big, thereabouts. I'm not able to give too much away exactly what it is yet, but it's I'm going to be running two or attempting to run two marathons a day for a significantly longer period of time, and this west coast of Wales, this Mission Wales was called Recon Impossible. So not impossible, impossible. What is possible? Impossible. Recon meaning recce. It was a test week, and we learned a lot in that week about like the logistics of actually managing to do it, what I'm physically capable of at the moment. 5 days was good. Day six was a big problem with my left shin slash anterior tibialis. And I can go into a bit of detail about some of those things, and around how we managed the recovery, what we did with our fueling, all of those things, and obviously what we did with breathing to try and not just approach it in a regulated state, not just working on like how do I regulate in an evening, like to try and aid recovery as much as possible when recovery period of time is very short. How am I able to stay well regulated throughout the marathon in the morning, marathon in the afternoon, and how did we break that down from a cognitive perspective? And what were some of the key themes that were coming out of it? I think is something that hopefully you're interested in and have some questions on, and I would love to share. I'd like to, at this point, giving you like that bit of overview, I'd love to open it up in terms of questions to go like what type of questions those that maybe followed along whilst we were sharing stuff on Instagram and on YouTube. Maybe you have some questions from like things that you saw happen. Maybe you just have some questions from what we've just described, giving the bit of an overview to it. And then I can start to fill in some of the gaps of the detail of, I guess, some of the lessons that we learned from it. Because final thing I'll say before actually taking some of those questions is the thing that I love about these types of events is what do we learn in them about ourselves and about how I manage myself and how I approach this life, Um, what do I learn in that physical endeavor that then is helpful to me and maybe potentially helpful for other people in our real lives, or I say real lives, like your actual life when you're going to not to get not to get better at running. Like the purpose is to become not a better runner, but become a better person as a result of working through this process. Um, that's sort of my mantra or ethos on it. Do we have any questions? Does anyone have any questions? Is probably I've had to abort to my. Oh no, no, I'm on the. Neve, are you able to man the chat box for me? Or if people want to unmute themselves and ask, that would be lovely. But if you want to, if you type it in, someone can obviously we can read them out. It's difficult for me to. Yeah, it's difficult for me to see
Jacko,
the
can
chat.
you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It's Coach
Dan,
Dan from the
yeah,
How
how
you
you
doing, mate?
doing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
good, mate,
good.
good. Yeah. So I was just thinking, I've got a client that does a lot of running, not to the level you do. She's on her third or fourth marathon,
Yeah,
and she's in a place where she's kind of like thinking about kind of toning it down, and she's basically late 50s, and she's in a position where she's only improving. And
yeah.
sorry, I get a wee bit nervous with my ADHD.
No, no, no. You good?
It usually takes me about 20 seconds, then it kind of dials down a wee bit.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
Here's how it
take
goes.
time. No, no,
This
take
is
time.
actually the Oxygen Advantage stuff has massively helped with this,
Yeah,
personally. So yeah,
yeah,
basically, her name's Gillian, and she's yeah, amazing. But moving a bit more to online. But the big thing that I struggle with her is it's basically the focus on the daily small habits that then lead to the big compound effect instead of going, I need to do breath work for an hour versus I'm going to do a little bit of breath work when I'm waiting on the kettle boiling, or I'm going
yeah,
to do a little bit of breath work when I'm in the shower, or whatever, just the kind
yeah.
of small doses. Is that something that you do quite often in your day?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I think for anyone, um, ultimately, like for anything, whether it's breathwork or anything that we're trying to like improve upon, the more consistent that we can be with it, and the
Mm-hmm.
more we embed it into and integrate it into our sort of everyday lives and habits,
Mm-hmm.
the more we're going to actually like carry on and do the
Mm-hmm.
thing that is that I'm doing. So the beautiful thing about breathing is, pick anything that you're doing other than breath holding. You're always breathing, but then breath holding is a breathing technique practice in itself anyway. So you're always breathing. So there's always something that you can do if you wanted to. Now that doesn't mean I have to like be constantly thinking about my breathing, but it's just where are those opportunities
Mm-hmm.
where I could do something. And I think what's really um, helpful, particularly in like what linking it to what I did on the run, was what breathing can I do to actually help with the thing that I'm trying to do? Because then you
Mm-hmm.
actually, rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it, I'm actually doing it to help improve my experience of this thing that I'm doing. So,
Mm-hmm.
if that's someone getting nervous before they go and do X, it's like, well, the breathing practice could be in the drive to the thing, or the walk to the thing, or whatever it may be. And then with our training or with our running, like what am I doing with my breathing to help me stay well paced and well regulated? What am I doing with my breathing when I'm trying to recover? What am I doing with my breathing when I'm trying to down regulate? And actually then I'm just using it to make the thing that I'm doing like a better experience.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah,
No, that's amazing. I think that's really good because I think for me is like that's me probably 2 years now qualified in the
yeah,
Oxford Advantage and applying it more on my own and with clients who are like running. I think the magic for me has been like what you're saying is building those habits so that you're starting to apply them in situations where you're kind of maybe just waiting to do something, but then
yeah,
also applying them in the activity themselves as well.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No,
No, no,
definitely.
thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, because I think when it's linked to when it's linked to me like having a better experience of something, um, then I'm then seeing like a positive outcome for it rather than doing it for the sake of doing it. So if I'm
Mm.
like trying to focus and concentrate better on like a piece of work or whatever, I sort of maybe I do something to help get myself really focused, and then I'm seeing this relationship between being, oh, when I did the breathing to help me focus, I did actually focus, but my output was better, or I'm doing a particular breathing cadence to help me work on my pacing for this run that I'm trying to do. I saw that it helped me do the thing. It's creating a positive feedback loop of like this thing that I'm doing is helpful to
Mhm.
improve the
Yeah.
outcome. And then again, we're more likely to be consistent and motivated to do it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And congratulations again on it was amazing, amazing achievement. Yeah.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
I'll let somebody else go. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Cheers, mate.
Got a
Um,
question about
yep.
your daily, your daily practice in training. I'm a ultra runner. My girlfriend just signed up for her first 100 miler today, this morning.
Wow.
So pumped on that. So
Congrats. Yeah.
excited to work with her in the process while she starts to train in her next training cycle. We're actually getting ready to go do an ultra out in Arizona 2 weeks from now. What was your daily practice in terms of breathing? Did you go through sort of the high altitude training, practice as it's lined out in the, advanced instructor training manual, or did you do something else? And then also, if you've got time, more
Yep.
along the lines of like what you had mentioned, like what do you do while you're running? Like for
Yeah.
me, I do a lot of like pace breathing, so I'll do like
Yeah.
breathe in for 4 steps, out for 4 steps type of thing as I'm going, just because
Yeah.
I feel like that gets me in a good mental state and a good
Yeah.
rhythm. But like, what are some of your practices while actually doing the event and doing the participation that help you find that rhythm, find that flow? But definitely, I'd like to start in my becoming an instructor, working with ultra marathon runners and
Yep.
other adventure sport athletes. So if you could provide some insight on what you did leading up to the 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks or through your training cycle in terms of your breathwork practice, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So I guess there's a huge component of trying to get a greater volume of work done to like be able to cope with the demands of running 2 marathons a day meant that like recovery was like a very key thing for me. So I'm a big fan of red light therapy. I've used red light therapy for 5 or 6 years. And that's basically either you stand in front of a big red light or you put it on the body, whatever. I've got these wraps and things. But essentially, you've got like a period of time where you're going to be still because you're going to have that therapeutic effect from the device when you're going to do your down regulation breathing then. So I already was like pairing and taking that the more seriously I took the better I would recover. To do a large volume of work and not get injured is one of the most difficult. Your wife, if you say your wife preparing for 100 miler, like you're going to have to do a significant amount of training to turn up to the start line, able condition enough to like not get injured during the event. But one of the big problems people have is like turning up to a lot of people turn up to the start line with all sorts of niggles or injuries, and you're putting yourself in a really difficult place because more often than not, I see this all the time. People, we don't take our recovery as seriously as we take our training. Um, so yeah, that's a daily thing. That's a daily thing for me in terms of down regulation breathing. Like the humming is the simplest thing that I do for that, and combining it with something else that's beneficial. So combining that with sauna, combining that with red light, combining that with grounding. Um, so just being barefoot on some grass outside, and trying to get some doses of that after, because I was training like 2 or 3 times a day sometimes, and making sure there's a dose of that recovery after every session, and then something before bed, like taking care of sleep being very important as well. Um, in actual, I wouldn't have probably been doing like you say, how high altitude training as it's laid out in the manual, I very much integrate it into the things that I'm doing. So I wouldn't have done any walking or jogging, just breath holds like that. I would be doing my sessions the way I would plan for the 2 marathons a day was I was breaking each marathon down into roughly it's like 10.5K, four lots of that. But essentially I was going like, right, I've got to do 4 10Ks in the morning. We're gonna have lunch, I've got to do 4 10Ks in the evening. So my training was built around like being able to make 10K as sort of sustainable and manageable to just like keep repping out. Cognitively, I only ever had to really ask myself, Jacko, can you do 10K? And it was like, well, I can do 10K. Like, not as soon as I was thinking about, yeah, but there's 7 more of them I've got to do. And then I've got tomorrow. And anytime it's thinking about that, like, and that got more challenging to not think that way as it went on. But having something to bring myself back to was like, just do this 10K chunk. That's all you need to do. Um, so yeah, in my training, the majority of that would have been done nasal breathing, always diaphragmatic breathing, always in control of breathing. I think the biggest thing that I utilize now the most is the relationship that your breathing rate has with your perception of effort outweighs or is more closely related to perception of effort, your breathing rate, more closely related to perception of effort than your heart rate or blood lactate levels. And this has been well documented in some of the more recent literature, some studies or some review papers from 2022 and 2023, where the feedback loop your breathing rate is giving your brain is more important than just even what your blood lactate levels can be. Like you want to improve your lactate tolerance, you want to improve all those things. But when I'm in the midst of the actual run, I need to be able to control my breathing rate. And there's some other factors then that go into it, in that if I can't control my breathing rate very well, then it's very hard for me to diaphragmatically breathe, because it's got a diaphragmatic breath, and a good breath is going to take longer because it's got to be deeper, and that's going to take some time. Whereas if my breathing rate is too fast, it's going to start getting like more jumpy. It's going to come into the chest. It's going to be shallower, and not only is that going to influence like the efficiency of my breathing, the feedback loops, the brain is that faster stress response type of breath, and so I'm knowing that like 2 marathons a day is a very stressful on just the system as whole, just the sheer time on feet, the coastal path, the elevation. The marathons were taking 6.5 hours, and on the first 2 days, I did more than 2 marathons a day because the event was stacked at the front, and but so that the end would be a little easier. So anything that could reduce stress was like significant. So yeah, that would be my main. Any like higher thresholdy type of stuff. I'd done some VO2 max testing at the university here, at Salford, and found out where my switch point from nasal to mouth would be in terms of like where was actually under oxygenating if I was forcing my nasal breathing. So when did it actually become more beneficial for me to mouth breathe? That for me was at 87.5% of my VO2 max. Nasal breathing was not more beneficial to me at that point. But how much of my training was done at that type of intensity? Maybe one session a week.
Right, right.
Yeah. My breath holding, I was doing a lot of strength training still, or a reasonable amount of strength training, like strength very important for like resilience and robustness. And I would do a lot of my breath holding in my strength training. So my strength training was high volume, like not like I wasn't doing any max strength stuff. It was all like 10, 12 plus repetition, like volume. Like I'd be doing like lunges with dumbbells going up the hill from my house, like doing 100 lunge, so volume high, like 100 straight lunges, like volume high, load like challenging, but nowhere near like what an one RM or anything like would be. And so in that level of like resistance work, there's some nice studies showing that like a hypoxic response can increase growth hormone secretion. So if I hold my breath and create a little bit of a hypoxic response in the muscle, then I'm potentially getting a little bit of a better dose for my strength work when my strength work couldn't be the priority, if that makes sense. And I still like for a little bit of an intensity. I do some of the, I guess, like the breath hold, like the repeat sprint type breath hold protocols. That's things like exercise 14 in the manual, is it? Like doing some breath holds every like on 30-second intervals or variations of, but doing them like off feet on a watt bike or on an assault bike, to get that more sort of lactate build up. So I'd building up to like, we start on like 6 second efforts, like build up to like 10 or even more. Like those efforts can get longer as people get better, but then if you're doing them in 30-second intervals, your rest period gets shorter. So that's challenging. I'm a big fan of using the mask for a little bit of the work, not loads, like it can be a little bit too restrictive sometimes. But the sports mask, very good for like resistance training for the diaphragm and that increase in CO2 we're going to get. And actually just getting yourself in a really flipping dark place, because if you do it with like some quite intense breath holds with some intensity, like it's pretty gnarly. Fear centers of the brain are going crazy, and we get to practice like, okay, when I'm really, really up against it physiologically and psychologically, can I actually cope? Can I stay calm under this stress? Or do I lose my head, and do I lose my cool, and do I start like and that was that's something that I've had in the past where I've done like an event that was too hard for what I'd basically come to come to do. I did manage to finish it, but I was in a fight or flight stress response almost the entire time. Didn't conduct myself very well and wasn't a particularly nice person to be around. So people are like, oh yeah, but you did it, you completed that event. And it was like, yeah, but it wasn't. That's not the way to do it. So yeah, that was quite a big focus for me to ensure that didn't happen, because my main support crew is my wife in a camper van, and if I pissed her off, like it wasn't going to go. If the whole thing is going to fall apart, because if she drives off and leaves me, then we're done. And those things, ironically for us, when if I do a decent job on that, she's amazing. So. Even though those type being in a camper van for a week, and one of you running, the other trying to find you somewhere on the coastal path, like that's logistically stressful, and it should challenge your relationship, where I'm pleased to say it made ours stronger. But I think going back to that like regulated nervous system, if I was off my head, stressed, like, and not able to cope with not able to regulate my stress response, it wouldn't have it wouldn't have gone well. And so then final thing, the pacing for running, as you described, yeah, huge. So there's some really nice literature been done on respiratory locomotive coupling, where linking our breathe or locomotive respiratory coupling, linking our movement, our step cycle with our breathing cycle. And there's a few different areas that it highlights that can be beneficial. Yes, pacing is like a one that when we do it, people can notice, and it's sort of quite an obvious one in that, like, I'm breathing 4 in, whatever out, like that is keeping my pace. Now, I found that for me, it's important that the total number of steps is an odd number. So 4 in, 4 out is even, which means that you land on the same foot at the end of every exhale. At the end of our exhale, we have the least amount of air pressure inside of us. So we're most vulnerable or most unstable within our core musculature. And if we repeatedly land on the same foot when our midline is most unstable, we're potentially like susceptible on that side to injury. And I was going to be doing a lot of steps, 110,000 steps most days. I wanted that to be evened out. And and I would be running my four steps for an inhale, 5 steps for an exhale on the morning, kept me at a nice sort of like 6 minute K pace, which was then, that's trying to be sustainable for coastal path and for long, for multiple days in a row. In the afternoon, as I was getting more fatigued and things were getting harder, to maintain that same pace, I would need a 3-step inhale and a 4-step exhale. So it was, I wasn't running any faster. Was I? And a question I don't know the answer is, it was interesting to observe in myself. It was like, right, in order to run at the same pace, my breathing strategies had to shorten. Was I needing more oxygen because I was fatigued? Was I generating more CO2 because I was fatigued? My heart rate was probably higher, so my physiology would have been a little bit different. I don't know the answer to it. It was an interesting observation. I sort of had myself. So the pacing is one. The evening out the side. So if people repetitively have like problem with their left foot or their left knee or their left hip, and you find out they're always landing on their left side at the end of all their exhales, evening that out can often be a definite like go-to as something to consider with that. With the end of the exhale happening on one leg, the start of the inhale then happens on the next. And when the initiation of my inhale starts when the other foot hits the floor, I'm getting the ground reaction force from my foot hitting the floor, which that ground reaction force, gravity is pulling me down. My diaphragm, when it inhales, wants to pull down. The literature describes it as like a bit of free energy for the diaphragm. The motion of ground reaction force is pulling you down. When it's in sync with the foot hitting the floor, is in sync with the start of the inhale, the diaphragm has a little bit less work to do, so it's a little energy saving for the diaphragm, which is a nice thing. And when you sync those things then up, the other piece that comes into play, which I think helps with the pacing, but is you almost get mesmerized into flow state, in that like it has all of the characteristics of flow state, in that you want short little goals that you like receive and get immediate feedback. So I'm trying to do a 4-step inhale, 5-step exhale. When I manage to achieve it, and one of the things I'm noticing is like, oh, the end of my exhale happened on my left leg, and then this next breathing cycle it happened on my right leg, and you notice that switching happen. You're getting that positive feedback of like, I'm doing it. And when you feel your diaphragm contract as your foot hits the floor, I'm doing it. And all of a sudden, you ran 2 marathons, and it's time to go to bed. But like time then starts, when you're in that flow, when you get that flow state, that's been highlighted in the literature, that people report getting into flow state easier with that locomotor respiratory coupling, they call it. But basically sinking breathing in steps. Great question. Trying to look at the chat. Can someone read the questions out to me? Because I can't. It's difficult for me to
Yeah, sure.
Because my computer died on me.
Okay, Charlie wants to know, he said, the issue I face with my athletes, that they work and train well when I'm with them, but when they train on their own, they fall back after a certain time. How do you manage to keep going, nose breathing, low breathing when it gets hard?
Interesting question. I was going to try and say something funny, like you have to go and live with them. No, I think this is where it's helpful to actually go to understand where is someone's switch point, in that they can't manage nasal breathing anymore. And is it just purely a psychological thing? Is there some airway restriction? Is there a mechanical, like they don't ventilate well in terms of efficiency with their diaphragm, etc.? And are they actually under oxygenating when they try and go for a higher intensity work? Like I've got a book coming out at the start of next year where I've done a lot of research looking at this for runners, of going the more latest research is looking at about 80 to 85% of someone's VO2 max is a ballpark figure in the literature where most people can reach that point. nasal breathing with a little bit of practice and adaptation. But then beyond that, some people will be under oxygenating. So if but that is quite a high intensity. As I said with mine, when I did it in the lab during a VO2 max test, it was 87.5%. So it's something that can be improved and something which is trainable and adaptable. But your ability at high intensities to ventilate through your nose is going to be dependent on things like the size of your nose, your nostrils, your airway, your conditioning, and your adaptation. But if there's a point when I'm actually under oxygenating, if you know, to actually know that we need to do some testing with some muscle oxygenation, but you can do that. I've got a portable device. Understanding that, like, well, if I've done some nasal training, like nasal breathing in my training, and I then have to switch to mouth breathing because I'm at an intensity that this is now feeling disgusting, and maybe I've tested and actually I know for me where that point is when I'm under oxygenating. But most of the time you can feel it in yourself. You're just like, this is just, I feel like I'm drowning. I'm just not getting enough air in. Then if I've done enough training and I've trained my diaphragm, I've trained my breath control, I am going to breathe more efficiently when I mouth breathe, so long as I've had some adaptation time with my nasal breathing. And again, that's been cited in the literature. People that have done 6 weeks of nasal only in their training, and then gone and done a 5K like time trial, like gone for a 5K PB, but allowed themselves to mouth breathe because they're going all out. And in something like an all-out effort in a 5K, you're going to be over 85% of your VO2 max. And they improved. And we can also see when someone's done, if we look at their ventilatory efficiency, so look at how efficiently they uptake oxygen, they do that better nasally than mouth breathing. But when someone's trained nasally, their efficiency of how they uptake oxygen at the lungs, even during mouth breathing, so long as they've trained and practiced, we see carryover and we see improvement. So if you only mouth breathe, you're not going to get any better. You might get a bit better at mouth breathing, but not in terms of efficiency, probably. You'll just get better at coping with it. And you definitely won't get better at nasal breathing. But if you practice nasal breathing with running, you'll get better at nasal breathing with running, but also your mouth breathing when you're running will also improve. And I think it's important for us to understand that process and what that point is, and for your athletes to understand that. The big question though comes in is like, are they just trying to train or run at an intensity that they're just not adapted for yet or trained for yet? And do they actually need to dial it down? Because that then comes to a question of like, am I doing this for health or am I doing this for performance? Because if I'm doing it for health, it's difficult to find an argument for mouth breathing. So understanding what are they trying to get out of the thing they're training for. Sorry, that's quite a long answer, but there was a lot of the short answer can just be like, oh yeah, just tell them to slow down and breathe through the nose. Like, but there's much more detail that we're sometimes missing with some of that type of stuff. And people, if they're finding that question was like, there was a little bit of like motivation for these people when they're on their own, not with the coach. If they don't understand the process fully, it's difficult for them to stay motivated.
Yeah. Thanks, Jacko. There's another question here. Gerard, he wants to know, what type of injury prevention practices do you do? For example, how much weight work or stretching do you do weekly?
Yeah, I don't do much like static stretching. I build my sort of mobility around a lot of breathing mobilizations that I do like pre-training and pre-run. Um, to try and get, well, I see when we have like a good functioning diaphragm, good alignment with the rib cage, good like mobility within the rib cage and the ribs themselves. The tissues around the hips are happier, tissues around the spine, the thoracic particularly, and around the shoulder, like those things function better. And when we do our strength following that, do our strength work utilizing those ranges, then we build some robustness and we build length and we build strength and stability. in that kinetic chain so that we don't get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. What did I do? So yeah, I think the injury prevention, very much being sensible with loading is important. And so when I say loading, I mean more like volume. So my periodization, so my background is as a strength and conditioning coach. So periodization is this notion of like, I'm going to gradually build up for a few weeks, and then we'd have like a bit of a deload week, and then I'd gradually build up a bit further and have a deload week. So I was working up towards some 100 kilometer plus weeks, but we built from like 50, 60, 70, deload back down to 60, build back up 65, 75, 85, deload back down to 70. So it was making sure that we had this like progressive overload happening with time for adaptation where we deload, not deload completely and do like don't run at all for a week, because sometimes if you just then stop doing everything altogether, those joints and those tendons, they like a little bit of stimulus, they like a little bit of load. But just that, like compared to what I did in the last 3 weeks, I'm dropping off a little bit, coming down a little bit, so I can go again and start climbing a little bit further. But that progressive overload is really important for injury prevention. That's massive for injury prevention. Other things that I would then do, I like to do a little bit of something most days. So I was also trying to, I know that if I was going out and trying to run 200 kilometers every week, that I'd have probably been injured before I got to the start line. That type of volume wouldn't be possible for me, like on a regular basis. So, but I was going to have to run 460 or something in 6 days. I was doing like, say, if I did like a half marathon in the morning, I'd do like 20K in the morning. So I do two of my 10K chunks. I'd then in the middle of the day do like a 30, 45 minute strength session. So that then in the afternoon, I'd run another two 10K chunks, so another half marathon. And I'd be doing that on tired legs, knowing that I'd have to be able to do that. So some of my volume was being done through like strength. That type of strength work in the middle of the day, sandwiched in between two half marathons, is never going to be like super high quality and super high load, but it was more like volume based and trying to build some resilience, particularly around areas that I know would be a problem for me. So I love running in Vivo barefoot shoes. So it's like a barefoot style shoe. The latest Primus Trail has got 3 mil of they call it compliance, but like of some like hard foam to take off a little bit of the pain you get if you stand on too many stones or run on like jaggedy rocks and stuff on trails if you want to have like a full barefoot shoe. But the calf, Achilles, have to be strong and resilient to deal with that type of like more natural barefoot style type of footwear. So there'll be some specific stuff around, a lot of calf, soleus work, Achilles work, a lot of eccentrics, some isometrics, and just a lot of loaded single leg calf like volume, straight leg and bent leg to try and just build robustness around there. I think the irony being, I did a lot of that. I had no issues with my Achilles, no issues with my calves. My Amy Vivo barefoot, Jacko 20% off. There you go. The the irony being, I think I created a strength deficit to the muscles on the outside of or outside front of the shin. So was so focused on making sure that my calves and my Achilles could deal with the strain and the load. I actually wasn't doing anything really specifically for anterior tibularis, is that muscle on the front of the shin that I got a lot of problem with on the final day. And I guess the other thing that has to do a lot of work when you're going downhill, like braking. And a lot of for the elevation, there was 13,000 meters of elevation over 6 days, which I also underestimated because I thought I've been doing a lot of elevation for like the 100 kilometer ultra trail Snowdonia I did in May, and like all the mountains around here, like you're always doing elevation. I thought the elevation would be fine for me. My focus on elevation is always on the going up because the up feels like the hardest. So it's like get better at going up. And on reflection, one of the lessons from this recce week has been like I'm not actually very good at going down, and going down was where I had my flare up, and had all of my problems with my shin and my and that muscle anterior tibialis. So I've already back running and recovered fully. And one of the things I'm doing is making sure that I don't neglect running downhill, and I upgrade the strength of anterior tibialis rather than only strengthening like the calf. You're going to make a weakness on the opposite side of the joint, which sounds sort of super obvious now when I think about it, but at the time, yeah, in my training, that wasn't one of the focuses.
Cool. And there's just one more question here in the chat from Dermot. He's interested in the nutrition part of Mission Wales. He's a vegan himself, but he's asking about your nutrition part in Mission Wales.
Yeah, so I'm not vegan, which would mean then like yeah, I was having meat as and I guess the big thing that we had from a nutrition perspective was trying to be as whole food and as high quality food as possible. My wife, very lucky, she's a tremendous cook and very passionate about quality of food and nutrient profile. So it was like organic grass-fed beef in an evening, like as part of like a chili with some organic sourdough. Like I ate like a king. You know, I've got some. Oh, it's actually this thing that I'm wearing. Enduro Sports provide. They've got it's a sachet that's like it's like an energy gel, but it's all organic food. It's like a date and nut sort of paste with coconut oil, all organic, all real food. And then I had a few things for like hydration, and a few energy gels, but mainly sticking to real food as much as possible. A lot of brie. If anyone that watched the I like a salami cheese brie sandwich. So yeah, it was. I probably for the first. I don't count calories, and I didn't on this. Chat GTP told me I needed about 56,000 calories across the 6 days, so roughly 10,000 calories a day. Whether you believe Chat GTP or not, is up to you. But obviously, I needed a lot of calories. But the quality of those calories is very important. Um, and yeah, try to get them from real foods as much as possible. And I probably did well for the first 3 or 4 days. Day 5, 6 is when I felt like I started losing, and like by the end of like when I looked at myself on Sunday once we'd finished, I was like, gosh, I didn't weigh myself before and afterwards. I don't have any scales at home, but I definitely lost some weight over those 6 days. So there was some underfueling happening, but I think that's potentially part and parcel of something like that. But that being a lesson for what I want to do next year, which is much longer, it needs to be sustainable if I'm going to be able to do 2 marathons a day for longer. So, yeah, there's a little bit of work to be done probably on the total volume of food and high quality food that I'm able to get in. But all in all, it was it was pretty. It felt pretty good. I felt like I ate like a king.
Okay, and last question, the biggest lesson from Mission Wales in terms of breath or mindset that changed you the most and that you'll carry on into the next mission?
Yeah, I just saw one flash up that I can't remember what it was. Something there was like a simple answer for it. Did someone just ask one just now?
Trevor just posted now, did sport massage play a role?
Yeah, I wish, but I didn't have any. I didn't have any medical support other than a friend of mine that's a physio on the end of the phone telling me how to put some K-tape on my shin. Yeah, that's something. Again, that's something that I've the logistics of the challenge for next year. I'm altering in order to allow it to be easier to get some of those types of provisions. So yeah, sports massage would have been great, but I didn't have anyone on the coastal path following me along, unfortunately. But I would have liked that. Biggest lessons, I think one of a phrase that was going around my head a lot during it, and as it went on, was harder to try and embody, but it was one that I just kept sticking to. Was "Don't wish it away." Um, Running on the coastal path was a very interesting experience in particularly that part of Wales. There was long stretches where visibility, like weather was good some of the time, but when weather was good and visibility was good, you could literally see like hundreds of kilometers ahead of you of where you were going, and you'd at times you'd almost like wish you were there or wish I was at the end, and not dropping into that was something I wanted to be very aware of, because you end up robbing yourself of the experience. And as it went on and it got harder, and particularly on the second to last and particularly on the last day, as it became painful with what was going on with my shin, yeah, it became more difficult. But I guess I was quite intent about that. I was very, yeah, don't wish it away. I think that's something that really plays out into like my everyday life. But again, in everyday life, it's hard when you're having to do something that you don't want to do. It's difficult to not want to do that. But understanding if I just wish this away, I'm like I'm robbing myself of the experience of what is actually going on right now. And ultimately, if I'm wishing it away, I'm like I'm wishing I I'm wishing myself to my death. Like that's not what I certainly don't feel that's what um, life is about. The other thing that was interesting with the coast, like as well as looking ahead, looking back, you saw how far you came. And when we got to Aberystwyth at the end of day two, and you look on the map, and then you look at the back, it was like I couldn't believe how far it was. Like you look back and you could see St. David's Head where we started, and it was like the furthest thing that you could. It was like you could barely see it, but there was a bit of a headland sticking out. You're like, that's how far we've done in 2 days just by move. Wasn't you're just moving. You're just moving. You're not going fast. You're just moving on your own feet. Um, and it was incredible to see how far you got. And for me, there was a bit of a metaphor within it where, as I looked back and seen how far I'd come, it was like looking back at my brain injury and seeing how far I'd come in my recovery. And that was that impacted me quite a lot. That was quite special. So I was very grateful for the coastal path. Yeah, the coastal path for that.
I think that's all the questions.
Cool. But yeah, unless anyone has anything else, thank you for joining. Thank you for everyone. There's a lot of support going on whilst we were doing it, which really spurred us on. There was lots of donations coming in when we were doing it for the two charities. Lots of you excited about the potential for something bigger next year. One thing I can promise you, I can tell you all about it once everything's finalised. But one thing I can promise you is it's going to be much easier for people that want to in the UK to come and get involved and come and run some little chunks with me, which I will be the difference when someone is running with you and chatting, like to how long that thing takes to get round two marathons is wildly different. So the support of people makes all the difference. And literally, actually, I have to say this, like I got carried almost the last 25 kilometers into Carnarvon Castle by a few people from our local little run club, and it was yeah, it was pretty special. And I wouldn't have been able to. I wouldn't have got. I just don't feel like I would have got there. I'd have got there, but I've got there hours and hours and hours later. I was just like limping and hobbling along. So yeah, it was the experience with more people around was certainly an enriching one. So I really want to press into that next year, and that just needs a change in some of the logistics. But I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a special one.
Great, thank you. We'll send out an email to the groups with the recording of today's session and highlights. Thanks a million, Jacko, for sharing all
My
that.
pleasure.
Great, so good. Can't wait to hear about the next one.
Cool. Thank you.